Hey everybody, in this video we're going to look at some of the top gangs of the Old West. Each is just a brief overview with interesting facts and history. Let's dive in and take a look at these gangs of the West. The Regulators. The Regulators were an American Old West deputized posse that fought in the Lincoln County War in New Mexico. The gang was formed out of numerous small ranch owners and cowboys in the Lincoln County, New Mexico area. Many of those who became best known as Regulators had a long history with one another previously. William Bonney, aka Billy the Kid, or Henry McCarty, would become the best known, mostly because news accounts attached his name to everything the Regulators did. The Lincoln County War brought him to the front, but several of the other Regulators were actually the driving force behind the events and had a history of killing alongside one another prior to the war. The Regulators would go through 3 different leaders, all but one being killed. Although Billy the Kid would achieve fame as a member of the Regulators, he never led them. Their first leader was Richard Dick Brewer, killed later by Buckshot Roberts, and replaced by Frank McNabb, who was killed by members of the Seven Rivers Warriors. McNabb was replaced by the Regulators' final leader, Doc Scurlock. Dalton Gang. The Dalton Gang operated during the time period of 1890 to 1892. The gang was also known as the Dalton Brothers because 4 of its members were brothers. The brothers were Bob, Grat, Emmett, and Bill. The gang specialized in bank and train robberies. The gang always had big plans, with Bob Dalton once claiming he'd beat anything Jesse James ever did, rob 2 banks at once in broad daylight. On October 5, 1892, the Dalton Gang attempted this feat by targeting 2 banks in Coffeyville, Kansas. 2 of the brothers, Bob and Grat, and 2 other gang members were killed. Emmett survived and was captured, tried, and convicted. He was paroled after serving 14 years in prison. Bill Dalton went on to form another gang with Bill Doolin, called, unsurprisingly, the Doolin-Dalton Gang, but they were also known as the Wild Bunch. Eventually, Bill Dalton left the Wild Bunch and formed his own gang. He was later killed by deputy marshals following his new gang's first and only bank robbery. The Cochise County Cowboys. The Cochise County Cowboys were a loosely associated group of outlaw cowboys in Pima and Cochise County, Arizona Territory, in the late 19th century. The term cowboy had only begun to come into wider usage during the 1870s, and in the place and time, cowboys was synonymous with rustler. Cattle thieves frequently rode across the border into Mexico and stole cattle from Mexican ranchers, which they drove back across the border and sold in the United States. Some modern writers consider them to be one of the first and earliest forms of organized crime syndicates in American history. The Mexican government lowered tariffs and added forts along the border, and cross-border rustling and smuggling became less attractive. The cowboys then began to steal cattle and horses from neighboring American ranches, reselling them to unscrupulous butchers. They held up stagecoaches, stole the strong boxes, and strong-armed passengers for their valuables. In some instances, they killed drivers and passengers. The Innocents. The Innocents were an alleged gang of outlaw road agents in Montana Territory who operated during the gold rush of the 1860s, preying on shipments and travelers carrying gold from Virginia City, Montana. It was reported that the gang attempted to steal gold while it was being transported. They killed many travelers who resisted. Sheriff Henry Plummer of Bonnet, Montana, was accused of leading the group and was executed by a group of vigilantes from Virginia City in January 1864, along with several other alleged gang members. The Wild Bunch. The Wild Bunch, also known as the Doolin-Dalton Gang or the Oklahombres, were a gang of American outlaws based in the Indian Territory that were active in Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma Territory during the 1890s. They were also known as the Oklahoma Long Riders because of the long dusters they wore. The Wild Bunch held its origins in the aforementioned Dalton Gang, of which Bill Dalton, George Newcomb, Bill Doolin, and Charlie Pierce were members. The Wild Bunch was known for robbing banks and stores, holding up trains, and killing lawmen. More than a few bystanders also lost their lives, often during confrontations between the gang and lawmen in towns where the Wild Bunch committed crimes or were laying low at the time. Of all the outlaw gangs produced by the American Old West, none met a more violent end than the Wild Bunch. Only 2 of its 11 members survived into the 20th century, and all 11 met violent deaths in gun battles with lawmen. So there you have it. These gangs of the Old West and the outlaws that comprise them are a major inspiration behind another well-known name for that place and time in history, the Wild West. All right, take care.